Now we'll start. Welcome, everyone, to our Business Leadership Conference Call Series. I'm Josh Walker. I'm the president of the American Port Chamber. We have Christina Wiesman, who's the vice president, on with us as well. And we're excited to host Dave Crenshaw, who is a speaker and a mentor. He trains businesses on all kinds of things. We've had him come speak to the chamber several times. And Dave, I'm just going to turn the time over to you and let you get going.
Okay. Well, thanks, Josh. It's fun to be here working with you again. Josh and I were old neighbors a long time ago in Orem. So welcome to this presentation. Over the last couple of weeks, a lot of people have been really looking for and wanting help with working from home. A lot of people are working from home for the first time. Perhaps their company's making them work from home more often. And as a productivity guy, I'd like to give you some simple principles that you can apply quickly to get the most from it. So just a little bit of personal introduction. I am from here in Utah. I've got 3 children and live in Harriman, but often I'm traveling around the world. For instance, this is a picture of when I was speaking in Zurich recently. I am showing that on the screen, right, Josh? You're getting that?
The screen share has not pulled up yet.
Oh, okay. Let me pull that up. Now you can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
All right. So I speak around the world. This was a picture from January when I was in Zurich. Obviously, that's not happening right now. But the good thing is the majority of my business is online training. I have several books. One resource I want to give to you multiple times, I'm going to mention this several times, is LinkedIn Learning. I'm an instructor for LinkedIn Learning, and they have made my course, Time Management Working from Home, entirely free. And when I say free, you don't even need to do a sign up, no trial, anything like that. If you go to davecrenshaw.com/home, that will take you right to that course. Just briefly, I always like to talk about the fact that Chuck Norris mentioned me in the official Chuck Norris fact book. That's just kind of a fun thing. He mentioned me under the Chuck Norris fact that Chuck Norris can kill 2 stones with 1 bird. And then because people are aware of that, they've been sending me this picture recently. So as long as we can get the virus to Chuck, everything's going to be just fine. Now, during my presentation, I always like to ask people to focus on taking, rather than taking action or rather than taking notes, taking action. The tendency when you hear a speaker is to write down the interesting things that they say to you. But instead of doing that, I'd like you to focus on the interesting things that you say to you. There will be moments during this presentation where you go, I need to do that. That's the stuff I would like you to think about writing down. And I'm going to start by asking this question just to think about. What's the biggest challenge that your company or you face that now that more people are working from home? In my experience, the blessing is also a challenge. And here's what I mean. When you have more freedom when you're at home, that gives you the flexibility to work whatever hours that you want. But that freedom of flexibility also creates the challenge of working late hours. And a lot of times people are worried that employees are going to work less because they're at home, but the opposite is actually true. Employees work longer hours and they experience a lot of burnout because there's no boundary. Before, there used to be the commute. Now it's not there anymore. Another freedom is the ability to see your family, which is wonderful, but it also creates the problem that you're always seeing your family, which can create a lot of issues with focus. And I mentioned the commute. You have the freedom to not have to commute anymore, but that lack of commute creates a lack of boundary time for when you go back to spend time with friends and family or people at home. So the key to all of this is to creating boundaries. And much of what I'm going to talk about is about helping you establish boundaries. Now, sometimes when I talk about a boundary, people are thinking, oh, that's restrictive. That's going to take away my freedom. But it's really more like rules of the road. Without the rules of the road, when you're driving, there would be chaos constantly. Because we have those rules, because we have those guidelines, we're able to go from point A to point B with relatively few issues. And that's what I'm going to do is help you create some guideposts, some rules of the game for yourself and for people that you work with so that you can have the freedom to be as productive as possible. So let's start with the first principle. which is create a productive workspace. And what I would suggest is that no matter what your workspace is, you can become a productivity environmentalist. And what you want to do is look at your work environment in terms of the 5 senses. What is it that you can see? What is it that you hear? What is it that you smell? All these different things can influence how productive you can be. And I want to start, first of all, by talking about what not to do. And some people fall into this trap. The absolute worst place that you can work from home is your bed. This will make you less productive. It will cause, health issues because of the posture that you're in. And it will disrupt your circadian rhythm, which is a very real thing and will affect mental health, which is something you must take care of during this time. The second worst place to work is your couch. Now, I recognize sometimes people don't have other options, but you want to try as much as possible to avoid these places. And if you must work in a couch, get a desk, a full desk that you can roll up to in front of you because, again, of the posture. And we want to establish boundaries of where you work, a clear separation between your personal environment and your work environment. Something as simple as a divider. I worked with one woman who she was in the basement, and she just hung up a curtain to be able to say, when I'm on this side of the line, it's work time. When I'm on this side of the line, it's personal time. Create that boundary. The next thing I mentioned, thinking in terms of the senses. You can think in terms of what you see and what you hear. So one problem that people have with sight is perhaps they put it by the window and they see all these things happening out there that distract them and pull their attention away. Sometimes I've seen people with offices where you've got a TV past the monitor. And so every few seconds you're looking up and being distracted by what's happening. So if you have visual distractions, it's sometimes better to put your work environment in the corner. And it doesn't have to be as formal like this. You can start with just a 3x3 space in the corner and you say, this is my workspace, and you protect it. In terms of sound, you want to pay attention to, what are you hearing? Are you hearing the dog outside barking? Are you hearing noises from people in the house? And I'll just talk about that issue specifically in a moment. But if you're hearing things, try to create some sort of a barrier, whether that's using headphones to listen to music or playing white noise. I've had people just get a cheap fan and put it next to them in their office, which again allows them to maintain focus for a longer period of time. Another thing to consider are the tools that you use. Now, this is an interesting principle that a lot of people miss. A 2% increase in productivity. If we can just do one little thing that improves your productivity by 2%, that gets you an entire work week of extra time every single year. And if we're talking about the business and people you manage, often the biggest expense is the labor expense. And so if we can invest $100 to get someone a better keyboard or a better mouse or a little bit more to get a better monitor, and they get a 2% increase in productivity, that means you're getting thousands of dollars back to your bottom line by the end of the year. This is a very significant investment that we want to make. You've heard the phrase that time is money. Well, this is certainly true in this case, that if we can invest money and get more time, you're going to increase productivity in your company and your personal productivity significantly. So one thing that I'd like to do is to pause for a second from me talking, and I want to give you a chance to answer a question in the chat window. And that is, answer the question, what's one small investment that you can make in your home workspace, or if you're responsible for employees, you can make in their home workspace so that you can get more time, get that 2% increase in productivity. So you're going to hear a little music here, and when this is done, we'll wrap that up and I'll look at your answers. Oops, something happened there. All right. Something happened there. All right. All right, great. I see a response from R. Matthews, a USB 10 key. That's great. I've got a little side one right here that I use. We've got clear the clutter and get a divider. Wonderful. More isolated from distractions. That's from Peter. Wonderful. Anything that you can implement, just that 2% increase in productivity. And right now, I've got what I consider to be the perfect office. This just happened in the last few months. I hired an interior decorator and all that kind of stuff. But when I first started, it was in a little tiny corner in a little tiny apartment with a beat up hand-me-down desk. And I didn't wait to the end to make the investment to get this office. I was able to get this office because every year I made a couple of little investments that didn't take much time, didn't take much money to be able to get the time so that I could be more profitable. All right, let's keep going here. Next one is create a productive schedule. And one of the problems that people have is they have no boundary time as to when their day is going to end. And the comparison I like to make, and I had a client make, a really successful businesswoman actually here in Utah, she talked about, I need to have a finish line. When you have a race, how do you know whether or not you've won? Well, you know that it's time to stop when you reach that line. And many people don't have a finish line, especially when they're working from home. You want to have in your schedule both a start line and a finish line. And you want to make a commitment to when that is going to happen. With that, it forces you to make conscious choices about your productivity space and your productivity time. When you don't have a boundary, you allow interruptions to happen. You allow yourself to be inefficient. But when you know you have to stop at that time, it forces you to look for systemic improvements in the way that you work. And sometimes you'll need more than one starting line and finish line. That's okay. I'll talk about that more in just a second. You might have to have it if you've got kids coming home, that sort of thing. The point is you have a clear boundary and you stick to it. The next tip deals with your most valuable activities. I call these in my time management training your MVAs. If we sat down and I talked to you personally for a moment and we listed out every single job description that you have, you're going to have 10 to 20 different things that you do. But of that list, only one, maybe two are most valuable. And the most successful people I've worked with focus their time on what is most valuable. But the reality is most people spend the minority of their time in these two most valuable things. So you want to identify them, and then you want to create the schedule of when you're going to focus on them and when you're going to work on them. You can create a template schedule like what you see on the screen, and then lay that side by side with your actual schedule. And when it's time to schedule work, try to schedule it into your MVA time and just create that recurring pattern. It's not going to happen perfectly in the beginning, but you want to gradually work your way toward the ideal. Another important principle of your schedule, I have a book called The Power of Having Fun. And in it, it sounds like a book about fun and play, and it kind of is, but it's really a book about productivity. And what I discovered was that when people take consistent breaks to do something enjoyable or refreshing, their productivity improves dramatically. And I would encourage everyone on this call to at least have somewhere in their day a 25-minute break of some kind. It doesn't have to be in the middle of the workday, it can be at the end, where you do something that's enjoyable to you. And I've got this picture up here because sometimes people think the break has to be just exercise, but it doesn't have to. The research shows actually that it can be even something passive, like just watching a show on Netflix or playing video games. While there are certainly health benefits to the physical exercise, the mental and performance benefits are the same with something passive as with something active. So in other words, just choose something that you enjoy. My personal enjoyment, my oasis, as I call it in the book, I like to play video games at the end of the day. So here's another time for you to answer a question. I want you to put this into the comments section. Take 30 seconds and answer the question, what is one change you can make to build a healthy work-life balance? Great. Let's see if I can get this to come up here. For some reason, Zoom's not playing nice with me. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Kelly mentioned stop working at some point. Lisa mentions taking a 25-minute walk in the sun. That's great, especially when you've been inside so much. Josh, schedule time to take breaks. Christina mentioned set a stop time. Peter mentioned better planning and scheduling tasks and projects. Absolutely. Okay, great. And I'm sure we'll have a couple more trickle in a moment. So let's go to the third principle, which is improve virtual communication. Right now, we are all getting accustomed to the survival skill of being on camera in a video. Now, with my career as an online trainer, I've been doing this for quite a long time. But for most people, this is kind of strange. This is kind of new. And one of the issues that we're running into is the challenge of channels. And when I talk about channels, I'm talking about channels of communication between team members and even with your customer. And we have so many different types of channels that we can use, and there's not a clear agreement as to how to use those channels. So let's talk about these for a second. We have email that we communicate with each other. We're using text messages to communicate with each other. We're using phone calls. We're using planning programs like Slack or Asana or Basecamp. And one of the issues that we have with virtual communication is people are using these different channels with assumptions in their head as to what is an appropriate situation to use the channel and what is an appropriate amount of time by which we can reply. How long is it appropriate to wait to reply to an email? 1 day, 2 days, an hour? How long is it appropriate to wait to reply to a text message? And we think that it's common sense. If you ask most people, they'll say, well, of course, it's 1 day or whatever it is. But if I asked every single person on here, they're all going to have a different answer. There's no such thing as common sense. Common sense is the result of repeated life experience and just repetition and conversations. So I recommend sitting down with your team and having a conversation with them about when should we use email versus when should we use a text message? When should we use a video chat versus when should we use a phone call? And when we use these, what's the appropriate amount of time to respond? Obviously, a phone and a video chat like this is immediate, but what about Slack? What about text message? And create a document that simply says, when we use this channel, this is how long we should expect to reply. When we use this channel, this is what we're using it for. Text messages are for emergencies, email are for projects, that kind of thing. And just sit down, have a conversation like this in a Zoom meeting, and create guidelines with it. Another thing that's really important is when you're leading, when you're talking with customers, when you're working with a team, take some time to just build morale. Do something nice. Just talk to people. And it doesn't have to be long. In fact, the shorter, the better. 1.5 minute video, in my experience on LinkedIn, is the maximum tolerance that people have for a quick video. So you want to have things that are 2 minutes or less. You just jump on and say, hey, I was thinking about you. Here's something that I wanted to share with you. A great tool for this, by the way, is BombBomb, as in an exploding bomb. BombBomb.com allows you to create video emails. It's a fantastic tool. You just jump right on, record a quick video email, and send it to someone. And it's a great way to create that personal connection while we're physically isolated. And if you want some inspiration on the fact that you don't have to be perfect, go check out Jimmy Fallon and what he's doing on YouTube with The Tonight Show at Home. It is so imperfect that it's wonderful. I mean, he's recording, he's doing his monologue, and as you can see, his kids are climbing over him and grabbing the paper and doing that kind of stuff. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be polished. Just be real, and it'll help people out. So, question for the third principle: what's one thing you can do to improve virtual communication in the workspace? Please just take a moment, put that into the chat window. I'll play that fun music for us. All right. So we've got, let's see, from our Matthews, remember to communicate. Danette, loved the idea of video email, checking out BombBomb today. Josh said, need to take some time to be real, have a little fun. By the way, I saw someone sent me, I did a webinar last week. They sent me something of someone making themselves into a potato head, and they sent that out to everyone just for fun. My kids' school here in Harriman, and when it snowed, the principal said, everybody go outside, make a snowman, take a picture. And then he made it into this really nice montage of every kid's snowman. It's a really fun way to do it. Lisa talked about Ask Team, how they want to communicate. Peter, regularly scheduled check-ins with my team. And Kelly, use standard shorthand for email subject lines like info or action. I love it, so that it's really clear to people what they need to do. Okay, let's move on to the final principle. Create a flexible systems for parents and caregivers. This applies whether you are a parent or caregiver or you work with people who are. We want to become aware that the situation is really strange right now. It's really unusual, and a lot of people haven't built structure on how to deal with the fact that you've got kids coming in and interrupting you while you're trying to work. Or you got your spouse asking you random questions to do things, or perhaps you have someone who's elderly or sick at home and you have to take time to care for them. The first thing that you want to do, it kind of goes back to that concept of communication, but have an agreement with your family members. And the agreement starts with the schedule, which I've already talked about, meaning here are the times when I need to work. And during this time, as much as you can, of course, if it's an emergency, it's an emergency. But most emergencies aren't emergencies, they're impatiencies. So let's have a time when I work, and then I commit to you in turn that when that time is over, I don't work. I don't drift into email. I don't start having conversations, that sort of thing. So you create that schedule, and I found that when you keep your commitment to them as to when you're going to focus on them, it makes it easier for them to stay committed to you. The most powerful question that you can ask is simply, can this wait? And I run into this even when people are working in their office. People just show up and ask random questions, and you say, okay, we have a time scheduled to talk about this. I have a time scheduled when I'm going to stop work. Can it wait until that time? And if they're not children, and I'll talk about that for a second, if they're not children, most people, teenagers, adults, can understand this principle and wait. And again, if it's a true emergency, you got to respond to it. Now, for children, I've had toddlers in the house. I've still got a 6-year-old at house. I've got a 14, 11, and a 6-year-old at home. You can use something for kids that are a little bit older. You can use something like a digital timer. Let's say when it turns to 2 o'clock, that's when I'll stop. And then I'll come give you my full attention. And for kids that are younger, I love just the simple kitchen timer. They can see that, and they can understand that when that thing finishes moving and dings, that's when it's time for daddy, that's when it's time for mommy to give me attention. So it helps them be patient with it. Also, with that schedule that you're creating, make sure that you create buffer time on either side of when they're going to need your attention. So when they stop school or when it's time for lunch, you have that scheduled, and then you create a little buffer on each side of it to help you make that transition. And I mentioned my book, The Power of Having Fun. Along with having fun yourself, you want to make sure that you're making time for them to have fun. My favorite question is, what is something that you would like to do with me? So you have your 25 minutes for yourself. That's important. Then you also have the time for them, and you let them choose what they want. And that conversation is so powerful. So last question I'm going to ask you to respond to in terms of the principles. How can I better communicate and coordinate my schedule with those at home? Please go ahead and type that into the chat window. Nice, Kelly. Kelly started us off by saying, sell my children for medical experience. We say in our family, we're going to sell our kids to the circus, so I can appreciate that. Josh said, calendar share with my spouse. Lisa mentioned, love the timer and the buffer time. My kids are grown, but I will try it out on my husband. That is not the first time I've heard that, by the way. Like, my husband would appreciate having that clock. Okay. Oh, and Danette mentions family meetings to schedule. Fantastic. So there's one more thing I want you to type in the chat window. At the beginning of this, I said, don't take notes, take action. So I'd like you to think for a moment, what's one action that you're going to commit to? You've had several ideas that you've put on here. Now I want you to really commit to one. Now you might do 2, 3, 4 things from this, but let's make a commitment right now to the one thing you absolutely will do. I'll give you another 30 seconds for that. Okay, great. Lots of great answers coming in here. Let's see. We have Danette family. Oh, wait, we got that one. Our Matthews, communication channel definitions. Lisa, learn about BombBomb and reach out to my team. Josh Walker, schedule out breaks. Peter, written schedule, planning better. Pamela says, schedule my day, start and stop time and stick to it. That's great, that finish line. Kelly, clean out my workspace. Make it as tidy as my real office. So true. That'll help boost your productivity. And Christina, set scheduled times for work, family, breaks, etc. Fantastic. So I like to finish with a story. So I want to just reemphasize this resource again. DaveCrenshaw.com/home takes you right to the free LinkedIn Learning course, which is my course, Time Management Working from Home. This is absolutely free from LinkedIn Learning. No sign up, no trial. It's just an open space and you can go there. Also, there's a place where you can ask me questions about the course. They have a Q&A feature where you can type in and do follow-up questions about it. And I cover all of these principles that I've talked about in greater depth, little bite-sized chunks, little videos. I like to leave time for Q&A, but just because we're running short on time, I'm going to finish with a question or with a story, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end for anyone who wants to. I just want to be sensitive to stopping at the half hour. So I worked at an event in Jamaica. I spoke to lots of business leaders there, and the man there told me this story. He talked about how he kept telling his wife that he was going to spend time with her, but there was always something new that came up, a new opportunity to expand to a different country, a local politician wanting to meet with him at the last moment, and he always let it get in the way. But he told me that he had had enough, and so he made the commitment in his calendar to stop work at 6 p.m. every day, no matter what. Because he told me, he said, there's always more work. There's always something I can do, but there's only one wife that I have, and I want to stay with her for the rest of my life. And he told her, this is a quote, shoot him with a gun if he doesn't stick to the schedule. So he created that schedule. But one last principle here. He realized that he couldn't do it immediately. And maybe you can't do one of these things immediately in the next 2 weeks. So what he did was he looked ahead in his schedule and almost planned it like a vacation. I can make this commitment a month from now. I can make this commitment in a week and a half. And then you create that schedule then. And when he did that, it strengthened the relationship that he had with his wife. And he was able to spend more time with her. And to me, that's what this is ultimately about. That's my daughter, Darcy, right there. It's about our family and making sure, and the people that we care about and our friends, making sure that we stay connected to, I said my internet connection's unstable, so I might have dropped out. Josh, I don't know if you want to open it up for any questions for people who want to stick around.
Sure. Yeah, we had just a brief lapse there on the last thing you were saying. I don't know if you want to repeat that again.
What was the part where I dropped out?
It was right after you showed the picture of your daughter.
Oh, Just that family is what matters. It's the relationships that matter. And if we don't have children and friends at home, being productive while working from home isn't just about getting work done. It's also about maintaining those relationships. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really appreciate you being on the call. I did give everybody the chance to unmute themselves. If you have any questions specifically for Dave, appreciate that. We can go to the LinkedIn courses, and we're going to actually share that as well as one of the resources we have. We have a resource page on the Chamber website.
Great.
We can use that as a resource. We have a lot of home-based businesses, and well, a lot more home-based businesses at the time right now than have ever existed in the history of our country. But do we have any questions from anyone in the group right now? Right, Christina, anything to add?
I have a question about scheduling. So when you show a schedule, you have it scheduled like from 8 to 5. Is it okay to chop that up and schedule around other things? I mean, maybe you can work from 8 to noon and then you need to help the kids with their homeschool till 3, and then you can go back after dinner at 6. And is that okay to do as well, as long as you just stick to the schedule?
Exactly. Yeah, I mentioned that briefly, how you can have multiple start and finish times in your day. That's fantastic. I even, people who aren't working from home, they'll even do that when they're working with people in different time zones. Perhaps they're working with somebody in the UK, and so they have to start early, take that break, then come back. That's perfectly good. It just matters that you made that commitment to that schedule and you stick to it.
Good. And can you just briefly cover some of the topics that you cover in that LinkedIn series?
It actually covers the 4 principles that we talked about.
Okay.
Everything from how to set up your workspace, how to communicate with your coworkers, how to set up a schedule, and how to be productive with your family as part of it.
Okay. And do you recommend on the video stuff, you mentioned the boomboom.com, is it right?
Yeah.
So are you finding video to be more and more effective in communication?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that we are coming to expect it now, because we're all being deprived of the face-to-face and the physical connection that we used to have. And so people still want that at a psychological level. And so I feel like video in some form should almost be a part of something you do every day, even if it's just as simple as sending that one bomb email to someone, some sort of outreach. I had a fellow LinkedIn learning instructor who's a good friend of mine in the New York area, Dean Carroll. He's got great courses on LinkedIn learning, and he just sent me a message. He said, "Hey, for no reason at all, I was just thinking about you and your family, wondering how you're doing." Those little moments are so powerful right now. We don't have to be profound. We just have to care.
Yeah. We did have a question come in from Andrea. Do you have more tips to work at home with active and clingy toddlers? And I have that myself. I've got a 3-year-old. She turns 3 tomorrow, and a couple of twins that are 5, and they've been pounding at my door this entire call.
So I think that the schedule needs to be more flexible with more starts and stops. And I'm gonna get technical, and then I'll get just down to business. There's a principle called the ultradian rhythm that I cover in the power of having fun, and that means that the average person works about 90 minutes until they need a break, until they slow down. So what I would do is look at your schedule when it comes to your kids and say, all right, can I get a 90-minute window here and then maybe a 30-minute window with them? Can I have it chop up? And maybe 90 minutes is too long for them. Maybe it needs to be 60 minutes and 15. But you have that on-off schedule, and you stick to it so that they know they can count on it. And then you have some sort of a visual reminder outside of the door. Perhaps it's just a sign that's red and green. It's a stop sign or something like that, just so they know that right now you need to focus. But it only works if they know that you're going to stop on that consistent schedule. But having dealt with toddlers at home, I have found that they respect it. Even a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, they respect it as long as they know that when it's up, daddy's going to be 100% with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. Christina, any other things to add?
No, I just think that was super helpful. Here at our house, we've got 2 workers, 2 college from here, and I think it was set up, schedule different times for each other, and I think that was really helpful to help us all be more productive.
Yeah. So again, thanks, Dave. Can you give us your website one last time?
Go to davecrenshaw.com for my stuff, and for that free course, davecrenshaw.com/home.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we're going to have this up on our Chamber YouTube page probably by tomorrow morning at the latest, and we'll send that link out. Again, we appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to sending a lot of people to your LinkedIn and your website.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks
for everyone for coming.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Have a good day.